up this morning to find you had gone. Keys were off the hook, cold eggs in the pan. 10 years we've been struggling, 10 years so far apart. 10 years on that Toyota, can't believe you stole my car. And all I had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. Rubbery eggs for breakfast. And all I had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. Rubbery eggs for breakfast. So I got on my bike and I rode through the rain. Was so late to work, my boss said not to come again. All the way home I kept thinking about the love we'd shared, about your long brown hair and how you took my car. And all I had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. Rubbery eggs for breakfast. And all I had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. Rubbery eggs for breakfast. Unemployed and maybe terminal. Could things get any worse? Then the radio man comes on and says Yellowstone has finally burst. So this is how I'll go, in a pyroclastic flow. They'll dig me up one day, and everyone will know that all I had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. Rubbery eggs for breakfast. That all I had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. Rubbery eggs for breakfast. This is the part where you sing along here. All he had for breakfast was, all he had for breakfast was, all he had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. All he had for breakfast was, all he had for breakfast was, all he had for breakfast was rubbery eggs. All right, I like to play a little song as I wait for everyone to show up, and then see which people immediately go away again. How y'all doing? You gotta accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. Hello, Monkey Mans and Vicky and Laura and William and Star Texas Pats. That's a good Star Texas Pats. 1-800-PATS. Stuart Fornash and Agape Field and Jupiter. Good to see you. Dan Lowe Music. Mary and Sherry, the Diversified Farmer, and Printer Bear. It's good to see you all. Rubbery eggs in the voice of Michael Bolton. So anyhow, we've been very busy lately. We have been doing this food forest challenge. I set up this little group on a platform called School, where we could directly interact and post photos and that sort of thing. And I had this idea. I said, you know what, let's see if I can get 10 people to plant a small food forest by Halloween. And I told people, I was like, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you guys all the coaching or whatever you want, but break your analysis paralysis and get your food forest in the ground. Well, so far, 38 people are at it in the Food Forest Challenge, which is way more than I thought. I thought, man, if I can even get 5 people to just kind of break through and plant a food forest, that would be good. but 38 was way beyond. I thought, hey, 10's a good goal. No, we blew through 10, so that's been fun. But I've been filming little videos for that, kind of tracking the progress, because we're in it too. I picked a little spot, put in a little food forest, and one of the questions that came up, which relates to today and the topic of this stream, is food forests versus grocery row gardens. So one of my food forest challengers wrote, so sometimes the subtle differences between similar concepts takes me a while, but I couldn't figure out why sometimes David the Good promotes keeping trees small in the grocery row gardens, and other times letting them become the canopy. And I realize canopy trees can be relative to the understory, but it finally hit me that they are two different things, although similar in concept. So other than the canopy differences, are there other things that I seem to be missing? Thanks, David, for the 4th food forest vid. That's what I meant by always picking up something new. And then another one of our challengers responded, I would say that the grocery row garden system is meant to be always able to include the growth of annuals, which is why you will keep the larger perennials in the system trimmed and chopped and dropped back to allow light penetration to the lower levels. A food forest is often designed to eventually exclude typical annuals, except maybe on the edges and property lines, and lead predominantly to the perennial production. Design forms are different too, with the grocery row gardens being straight lines and food forests being pretty much free form. There's a good YouTuber called Weedy Gardener from Australia that has planted a really cool swale system since 2019 or 2020 with the help of another permaculture guru, Jeff Lawton. When Weedy does a tour, it always makes me think of the grocery row garden system, but with curves. So I responded to both of this. Yes, that's right. In the early years of a food forest, you can grow more annuals. In the later years, the perennials and the trees win. In the grocery row gardens, I'm deliberately keeping the trees from winning. The idea is to get maximized production from both perennials and annuals without allowing complete succession or maturity to take place. There's never been a problem with me reaching complete maturity. So, what are you going to say about that? But a food forest is less work, but less productive. And we let the food forest trees reach for the sky, so they eventually become massive producers. So I was thinking, for those of you that have not been privy to these discussions, it would be kind of cool to run through it here as well. A food forest, right? The idea is that you are recreating a forest. You are recreating a forest, but focusing on food and perhaps some secondary production of goods like firewood, forage, mushrooms, etc. But the general idea is, instead of just a woodlot or a stand of pines or something like you might have in nature, you're going to really create a system that is tailored to meeting your needs, both your needs in the household and possibly the needs of animals that you might incorporate into it, or animals on your farm, etc. A food forest system is, by its nature, generally low maintenance in the long term. Just like you don't have to go out and water and prune the forest and fertilize the forest, etc. A food forest system is a way to use that long-term power of a forest and the strong hardiness of trees to produce you food with a minimum of work, and also to kind of recreate a shady Eden-like environment. And the downside of a food forest is that as it matures, the canopy does start to close, and unless you start to chop it open and bring it to an earlier stage of succession, as they call it, you are not going to get the high production of annuals. There was a time when I wanted to just do nothing but plant perennials. I just thought the idea of plants that last long term and take care of themselves, that's just the way I want to grow food. But I did a little bit of comparison. And you can actually see this comparison. I think I wrote it into the book Create Your Own Florida Food Forest, the big expanded second edition of Create Your Own Florida Food Forest, the production of annuals can be ridiculously high. Now, it depends on what annual you get, but I called Chestnut Hill Tree Farm, and I talked to my friend Heather over there, and I asked her what kind of production you could expect off of a chestnut tree after it hit maturity. So she said at about 10 years, I think it was something like you could expect about 25 pounds of nuts, and at 25 years, it'd be 50 or more pounds of nuts for a productive tree. So that's pretty good. I mean, that's a lot of chestnuts. 50 pounds. That's a nice big sack of chestnuts, right? Maybe a couple of 2, 3, 4, 5-gallon buckets full. That's pretty good. However, if you make a little compost pile on the ground and you planted 3 pumpkin seeds, I mean, one of my pumpkins, this was an exceptional case, but one of my pumpkins last year, running out of a compost pile, continued producing all the way through into the summer, died back a little bit, and then produced again in the fall, and gave us over 450 pounds of pumpkins. That's inside of one growing season. So start to think about that. If I was hungry, I would want pumpkins, not a chestnut tree. I would want to have put in a bunch of chestnut trees at some time in the past. That's great because they're no work anymore. I don't have to replant them. But the thought that, I mean, have you seen these guys growing giant pumpkins? Right? You get a 1,000-pound pumpkin off of one vine. You can't get that kind of production often from perennials. Some of these annuals, so fast. It's so fast. So that's something to consider. The food forest system becomes a lower maintenance system, an easier system, and as it matures, it gets easier. So you may not have to work so hard at it, but your production may not be high enough. The grocery row garden system is a synthesis. That's kind of, I'm starting to sound like a professor. Let's not do that. The grocery row garden system. It's kind of like a simple thing. It's got some annuals with some of the production that a perennial brings. Some of the easiness of perennials with a high production of the annuals. Maybe that's still too complicated. Annual, take more work, make more food. Perennial, take less work, make less food. So it's a combination of both high production. High production of annuals with the long-term ease of care of perennials, and then some of the things that you can only get from perennials, right? There's some perennials that are just, they're irreplaceable. So in our first couple of years of a food forest, if we have planted a bunch of perennials and we don't actively try to improve and pack annuals in there around it, like you can go and intensively make a bunch of little garden beds or something inside of your food forest in the early years while there's still light. But eventually that kind of, after a few years, the canopy is starting to touch and you're not going to be able to grow that much anymore. The idea with grocery row gardens is to keep the trees small and the shrubs small enough that you can keep that high octane annual production running. So you get those trees small enough with enough light coming through and contained enough that in between I could pack in 100 pounds of daikons over here. I could put in 500 pounds of watermelons, yield 500 pounds of watermelons out of a ground cover. Last year we yielded something like 740 pounds of watermelons from the ground cover in there. And I think something like 160 pounds of cucumbers. Plus, I don't remember how many pounds of sweet potatoes. Sometimes I run through the numbers on my site and I start to go, I'm glad I wrote that down because I'm not going to remember that. But it was a couple 100 pounds of sweet potatoes after a couple of 100 pounds of white potatoes. And then that was followed by, 100 and something pounds of cucumbers, and then the watermelons. And then the sweet potatoes at the very end of the year. It's like the last thing we pull, usually right before frost, are the sweet potatoes. So that kind of production is not going to happen if we had just put in an orchard, right? If we just put in fruit trees, you're going to have to wait some years to get the yield off of a tree. But if you want to be filled, right, you need those annuals. You just need to get annuals in the ground. This is like survival gardening 101, is you need calories as soon as possible. Hopefully from the soil. Keep it simple. So the benefit of the grocery row garden and doing the pruning twice a year is that it allows you to keep your annual production up. So this year, the grocery row garden has yielded roughly 1,000 pounds of food so far. So that's pretty good. And some of that might have probably come out of the edges of it, where we have a couple of trellises and things. But it's pretty good. And it's not done yet because we haven't harvested the cassava and we haven't harvested the sweet potatoes. The food forest has given us a couple of 100 pounds of food. The food forest is actually bigger than the grocery row gardens, but the ground is not as improved out there, and we didn't intensively plant annuals in it because there's still a lot of grass. And you're not starting with kind of a good, clean garden bed in the food forest. You're kind of sheet mulching and chopping and dropping, and it's a lot rougher. And I just kind of go through and mow strips and pads through it, and then throw pieces of throw compost piles here and there, whatever compostable materials and mounds, and start pumpkin seeds in them and just let them run over the grass. And so it's not like I really took care of it like you do in the grocery row gardens. You're putting in more effort on the soil and on the pruning and on the weeding. And so there is that aspect of an annual garden, but you have the long-term potential of the perennials. So apples and pears or bananas, if your climate allows, that kind of thing can be coming in between. In the case of what we have right now coming in, we are harvesting figs. And early in the spring, our first yield out of there was mulberries. Mulberries were quite early. It was mulberries and white potatoes, and then it moved on to cucumbers, and then it moved on to watermelons, and then we pulled some pumpkins out of there. I don't recommend you grow pumpkins in your grocery row garden because they're super aggressive and they crush everything. But I had this really rare pumpkin I was trying to save, and I stuck a few in there, and they made a big mess. They made it almost impassable in some spots. Right now we're harvesting sugarcane as well as figs, and it's really insanely messy right now. Like the amount of vines and everything that have grown with the heat, all of the really tropical stuff has taken off. Our next set of yield that's coming out of there is the Jamaican sorrel, which is it's an edible calyx that's like a fruit that fills in for cranberry. Sometimes they call it Florida cranberry, and actually my wife writes about it in her little cookbook that she finally wrote, the Florida Food Forest Cookbook. I actually think she's got it. Let me see. See if I can show you a picture. Here it is. So right here, that is Florida cranberry relish. Florida cranberry, aka Jamaican sorrel. Sometimes they just call it sorrel. They make these fruit-like things. This is after it's been cooked down. She puts in some, what does she do? Orange or apple juice, some sugar, ground cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, Florida cranberries, some raisins, and some chopped pecans, and you cook it together, and it's just, it was her mom's Thanksgiving cranberry relish recipe, and then she tweaked it and switched the calyxes from the Jamaican sorrel. It's a great big annual bush. It makes a great big bush, and then it just flowers all over it, and it makes a bunch of these calyxes. And you harvest the calyx off, and you take the little seed pod out of the middle and get rid of it, and then you've got this weird little cup-shaped fruit that you can then turn around and use just like a cranberry. But people that have tried it said that it tastes better to them than the standard cranberry relish. So even her mom was surprised by how good it was. It's one of those cool things that you can do, that you can get from an annual. I can't grow cranberries here, but I can grow that, and they make a massive amount of those calyxes in the first year. So we're waiting on that right now, and then we're going to be pulling everything else out and resetting and putting it all to bed and improving it. So if your personality type is you like order, you like a lot of control, you like high production, I would stick to row gardening, raised bed gardening, where you're doing everything on a very tight schedule. You have your seed trays and your transplants, and you are going to just try it. You're the type of person that runs a chalk line. You're gonna get everything really nice and perfect and organized, or do those beautiful little raised beds where you have grids for your spacing. You can get a massive amount of yield that way. Just because you see my garden looking like a wild jungle. I love the jungle. I always loved the jungle. I moved to the jungle for a period of time. But growing up in South Florida, I always loved the jungle. I like the wild, rampant growth. I don't mind sacrificing a little bit of productivity or efficiency for the sake of having a wild ecosystem that is constantly surprising. I like to see the insects and the spiders that show up. I like the butterflies that show up. I like not remembering where I planted something and then having it show up and surprise me, or just run over and crush another plant. Right now we have the loofah that ate Chicago, growing out from one vine, and it's gone all the way over the little garden niche that we have, and it's now spreading across the plaza and making loofahs across the ground. Totally ridiculous. But I like that. Some people don't like that sort of thing. So if you want to be super organized, if you're super organized, you have the time, you have a green thumb, and you're just the type of person that wants things to be as efficient and clean and organized as possible. You are the type that should probably be growing a row garden or biointensive type gardens with nice straight lines, grids, highest production possible. You're the type of person that measures the heat in your compost pile and knows the name of every pest and has organic sprays that you've developed for this and that and the other thing. That's totally fine. You can get high yields that way. If you have less time, but you still want high yields, if you're a little bit more of a free spirit, and when you see an open spot, you're the kind of person that's prone to walk around with a pocket full of seeds and stick a seed in here and there and just see what happens, the grocery row garden is a good basic organizational system that it gives you alleyways, it gives you pathways, it gives you a grid of a small orchard. You have to prune it twice a year generally. So it's not a high amount. It's not like you're constantly pulling and digging transplants and doing this and that and the other thing and trying to stay on top of all the planting dates and everything. You just roughly prune it in the summer and roughly prune it sometime before it wakes up in the spring. So you prune for vigor and you prune for shape as you need to. It doesn't really take very long because you're keeping the trees small. You're basically trying to keep them, hedge height. And you've got your open space, and you can plug in the annuals then. So you're keeping the shade off it, you're plugging in the annuals. If you have just a modicum of organization and you just lay this thing out and you start producing, there's no reason why you can't be making over 1,000 pounds of food in your backyard in the first year if you have about maybe 5,000 square feet. If you don't have 5,000 square feet, you can make a smaller version of the grocery row garden. Your yields are going to be a little less, but even if you have a tiny backyard, it's very possible to kind of make a small system. You're not just, you don't have to just grow in containers or something. There's certainly some perennials and annuals that you can keep small and work into a small space. We've talked about small space food forests before, and it's very doable when you know that you can keep a tree at 6 to 8 feet, which you can. That allows a lot more options for a small yard, right? It's not like the tree has to get 20 feet or 40 feet or 60 feet. It doesn't. If it gets too big, you can cut it down and get it to fruit at a smaller size. And if you stay on top of it when it's little, you can have basically shrubs that produce. So Kevin over at Epic Gardening just did something about his citrus hedges. You don't need the citrus trees to get 20 feet tall. You can keep them pruned down to hedge size. You can plant them closely together. No biggie. They're a lot more malleable than you think. That's why the grocery row garden system works. You do have to put a little bit of time in to keep it cut if you want that annual production. If I were to ignore it completely for a few years, it would be a closed canopy food forest on a grid. It would probably be more like an orchard than anything else because it would pretty much shade out the stuff in between. I could just mow my way through it and I could ignore it. Maybe at some point I just don't care about having the annual production out of there anymore, and I just want the chestnuts and the figs and the pears and the peaches and all that stuff to just produce without me having to prune them anymore. And I could do that. But if I kept them small when they're young, it's easier to kind of keep them to that as they get older. It's harder when you have a tree that's already gotten gigantic because it's a major stress to prune it at that point. But a small tree, if you kind of keep it under control and train it the way it's supposed to go when it's little, it's easy to maintain later. So now let's say that this is just too much planning for you still. The thought of having to sometime in the spring go out there and plant your radishes and put in a patch here or prune at the solstice, etc. You move all the way to the let's make a food forest level, and as I repeatedly try to drive home, a food forest doesn't have to be elaborately planned. I've seen systems that you could call food forests that are not called food forests, but it's just farmers, gardeners, the woman of the house goes out, plants what she likes in the backyard, plants more of what she likes around them. As somebody comes over and says, hey, I brought you this, she puts it in where it looks like it's an open space, and you end up with this big set of perennials growing around the yard, and you've got a food forest. It wasn't like you spent $5,000 on a landscape designer and a plan and heavy equipment to come in and everything to be measured and spaced, and you're trying to get all the angles correct and all the layers correct, etc. You pretty much just plant where there are gaps and let it sort itself out, and if you don't like where something is, you dig it up and move it, or you cut it down and you feed it to something else. All you really have to do is just get out there and plant a mess of trees and shrubs and vines and whatever you got available until it kind of meshes together into an ecosystem, and you just beat back the more aggressive portions of it. I mean, I go around. So this is one of my son's sickles. My son makes these sickles. He just actually listed some more of them, but this is a little hand sickle based on a design that we found. And I'll just go around with one of these things, so like that weed goes down, that branch comes off. And as long as it's a small branch, this can handle it. If it gets too big, this is kind of a little small, but it's nice to do the little bit of tight weeding. And if I'm going around something like a ginger, I'm gonna chop, 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 chop. The bigger stuff, I get the machete out. The really big stuff, I get the chainsaw out. But you just walk around with your little tool and this thing's ready, take them out, move them around. So it's not a big deal that you really have to think out. You start cuttings, you start seeds, you get plants from friends, you trade for this and that and the other thing. You go to the nursery and you buy a few plants here and there. You learn how to graft or whatever, and you say, hey, I'm going to try this over here, and I'll plant this over here, and I'll plant this over here. And then you just kind of work out where your pathways are, etc. I mean, don't plant a fig tree on top of your septic tank, obviously, and don't somebody I saw planted a jackfruit 4 feet or so, or 6 feet from the back of the house that they built. And a jackfruit is a big tree, and it pushed up against the porch, and it became a worry to the next homeowner who cut it down, which was really sad. They cut it down and burned it, and it had a beautiful trunk. And I wanted to, if I could have got it before they burned it, I would have taken it to the sawmill, because jackfruit wood is very pretty. But I mean, if you're gonna get rid of it, at least use it for something. It's very sad. But anyhow, it's right along the back of the house, etc. You got to think about these things. But remember also that you're in control. If a tree starts to get out of the way, too big, too crazy, and it starts to shade stuff, or you don't like the fruit or whatever, just cut it down. Doesn't matter. And remember that it all returns to the soil. Okay, so you don't cut it down and bag it up and take it to the street. Chop it into little pieces and put them around other trees to rot down. A forest grows on the remains of an existing forest. That's how they like to grow. The tree is always dropping leaves and sticks down and feeding the ground. So get your food forest system going and rolling, and it's easy. If you want to join my food forest challenge, I put a link to it below. But if you want to plant a food forest by Halloween and you don't want my input on it, and you don't want to do the sharing photos and everything else, that's fine too. Just do it. I mean, just get it in the ground. Give yourself a date and say, I'm going to go plant my food forest. Same thing goes for a grocery row garden. A grocery row garden takes a little bit more planning, but it's a very easy system. I've explained it on here. I've explained it in the little grocery row gardening booklet. It's an easy system for anybody to follow. I give the spacings between trees and the spacings between shrubs, and then you just fill in the gaps with whatever annuals you like, and whatever grows well in your climate, and whatever grows well in the season that you're planting. It's easy. It's this beautiful little grid you can just plug things into. If you don't feel like a food forest, if you feel like a food forest is a little bit crazy for you, put in a grocery row garden. If a grocery row garden is too crazy for you, make a little square, put some rows in it. Plant some rows of beans or something. As we're coming into fall, plant yourself some cabbages or whatever you can. Just the point is to overcome your analysis paralysis and grow food. And I put the challenge up to try and get people to do that. If you're kind of paralyzed with fear, and you just or you just can't make a decision, it really helps to have somebody kind of carry you over to say, here, I'll tell you what to plant. And that's what I've been doing. I post pictures of what I've been planting, and then we've got people from a bunch of different climates. So somebody's like, what could I plant here? What could I plant here? What could I plant here? And that's been fun doing the research. I've grown everywhere from zone 6 all the way to equatorial tropics. So if it gets north of zone 6, then it becomes a research project. And there are some good people for that, like Paul Wheaton at Permies.com. That is a very useful site. Permies.com has so many intelligent people in the forums. You can go over there and ask a question, and there's all these wonderful people that will answer your questions. And there's a site called Temperate Climate Permaculture, which also has a lot of useful information. And people are doing good work and sharing the info if you know where to go and look. And as for the design and everything, I'm happy to help people with all of that. But your local resources are also really good too. If you'll learn a lot from the guy next door. If he's growing food and you can ask him what he's growing, you'll learn quickly from people around you. And as they say, iron sharpens iron. So it's good to make friends with other gardeners and talk over the fence. So how do I join the Food Forest Challenge? I just put a link to the Food Forest Challenge. It's a private membership site is what I have right now. Now, if you don't want to join the site, if you join the site, you get the whole community, and I help people along the path, and I answer questions every day. I go up there and I posted update videos on what our food forest system looks like, and then I answer questions. And then once a week, this is a cool thing, I've been doing this once a week stream, and I often get to have guests on. So we've had guests talking about survival chickens, free-range chickens. We had a guest come on and talk about raising sheep. We have talked about homestead cooking. We had a grafting class. We do a different interesting talk. Sometimes it's me covering a topic, and then it's a wide free-for-all open for questions. Because we do it on a Zoom call, we could see everybody's faces, and we could switch the spotlight between people, which is it's really been kind of fun. I hadn't done it like that before, but I've learned how to do it. I had to catch up at some point, you know. And but if you don't want, you don't want to join and get all that stuff, you can always just say, I'm going to do this by Halloween. And I mean, I don't mind if you email me or something and you say that you've done it. I would definitely love to see what you planted. And I try to answer comments on YouTube too, but it's gotten harder. I like having a community where we can talk back and forth, and I can actually we can post pictures and videos and stuff and see what's going on in people's gardens, which is a lot more useful than I have this white thing that's on this one thing, and I'm not sure what that thing is. So it gets a little bit harder sometimes. It's kind of nice to look at it and say which white thing is that, you know. So that's what we're doing. That's the Food Forest Challenge. We're trying. Initially I said we're going to try and get 10 people. 10 people. Oh, the other thing is I recorded 5 in-depth video presentations on starting a food forest the easy way. So I created a food forest course demonstrating how you can go and lay out a food forest in an afternoon. And then we went back and visited a food forest that I established 13 years ago and went on a tour through that and talked about what could have been done better, what should be done now, and long-term maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So I created a course and I put it up there, and then that's just in the classroom along with all of the archives of interviews and other etc. videos. So that's what we're doing, and that's been a lot of fun. That's why I've been a little bit less busy on YouTube lately, because I've been putting my effort into the Food Forest Challenge. So let me answer some questions. Sarah says, is Ezekiel going to be selling his land-raised watermelon seeds again this year? The SFB are crushing my Cucurbita Maxima dream, so I'm going to pivot to watermelons next year. He had less watermelons this year because there was a little bit, they were a little weirdly late this spring. So he didn't get as many. And then a batch of them was eaten by rodents. That was not something we expected, but apparently my wife says we can't say R-A-T. We don't want to say that there was an R-A-T because that sounds scary. So it was probably a mouse, definitely a mouse. So the mouse ate a bunch of watermelon seeds, which was not really cool. We found a bunch of shreds of watermelon seeds from the ones he was drying. There are a few that he still has, I think, but it was not as good a year. So I don't know how much he's saving and what he's going to be growing. I can ask him too. Green Country Agroforestry said, this week we planted winter wheat, daikon radish, and buckwheat. I should throw in a few cabbages. Yeah, good idea. I just planted daikons in our little food forest patch that I built for the challenge. I just posted a video yesterday where I put in daikons, but we also put in turnips, and I planted some cucumbers in case we have a warmer fall and we can get a few cucumbers before things get cold. I just threw a bunch of seeds over there and just crumbled them into the compost, and then threw some non-sprayed hay over them. So Madam K says, I have a walnut tree that keeps growing back after I cut it down. It has some caricature to it now. Trimmed it this year, so it's looking like a bonsai walnut tree. That's pretty cool. You know, the fact that it keeps coming back, you know, you might just let it grow for about 6 years or so until you get it to a good harvesting size, and then harvest some of it and then let it come back again, you know. It's pretty cool. Oh, you bought a meadow creature. That's cool. I love those broad forks. I use it all the time. Yes, the pecan shrub. That will be interesting. Sarah says, I wonder where the line between grocery or gardening and food forest really is. I've got ramps growing under my little dwarf pruned pear tree. It's really, there's a little bit of flexibility. I tend to think of a food forest as more of a long-term, free-flowing forest system where you're really mimicking a forest, and the straight lines of the grocery or garden and the high focus on annuals is not really, it doesn't really flow like a forest. But it is aspects of food forest design. What I was trying to do when I designed the grocery or garden system was to create a series of edges, edge, edge, edge. So as much edge as possible. So it's like forest edge, forest edge, forest edge, and get the light and the energy moving through it in a series of edges. And I do that in our food forests too, by creating the islands and then mowing in between the islands. And then as it gets bigger, you start to cut it back as you need to. Sailor Cowboy says, I'm semi-organized, a bit of order amongst the chaos of entropy, or the other way around. Yeah, then you're probably my kind of gardener. I love the food forests and how wild they are, but I also practically need to feed my family. I don't want to buy food as much as possible. So the grocery or garden allows us to, boom, here's our production. Here's our high production. But it also kind of fills the need for a little bit of beauty and jungle and a little bit of madness and craziness. So it's kind of in that border, Which do you think is better for scrubland or shrubland biome in southern Arizona desert? One of your big problems there is probably the lack of water. If you have water, I think you could probably use it more efficiently in a grocery row garden, but if you don't want to have to water, you could stick to natives and a combination of your native plants that are useful or edible with a good amount of other useful plants from arid, warm climates. So if it's possible to grow, say, pomegranates, figs, maybe you can get away with olives in southern Arizona, but to probably get some of your somewhat shade producing, nitrogen fixing trees mixed into that to give them shade, because some of those trees, they just simply cannot take the brutal heat. So it's good to see you, Carolyn. I see you here. Hello from Bradenton, Florida. Hello. I am gonna go here. Yep, store food is full of agricultural chemicals. I agree. I am totally with you. I don't know how it's been handled. I don't know how long it's been since it was harvested. I don't trust the system. I trust my backyard more than I trust the system. So, and I'm not worried about, like, I remember seeing some article. They're trying to tell people that backyard gardening was dangerous because, like, a bird dropping could get on some of your food. I'm like, dude, come on. Let's just get terrified. Let's just get so terrified we just eat goo from tubes. Grateful says, I'm in Tennessee. Did you get bamboo to grow when you lived here? Yeah, there was a running bamboo that a friend of mine had that was pretty aggressive, and I would go over and harvest canes from her, so I know there are some. Passiflora incarnata will spread everywhere through underground runners. Yeah, I do. I love those. Just plant it. Elise, just plant it. It's a maypop. It's passion fruit. You can chop it down if you want to, and the butterflies will eat it. Don't worry about it taking over the garden. Just plant it. It will spread, but you just pull it up. It's so easy to pull up. I wouldn't worry about it. Plant it. It's beautiful. And if you ignore it, and it makes more maypops, and it takes over something, cool. Don't worry about it. I used to have it at the edge of my garden, and it would often start to grow crazy, and then the butterflies would just come and defoliate it. We had both zebra longwings and Gulf fritillary caterpillars on it. and they would just chew it to shreds. I actually rarely got any maypops because I got more butterflies than anything else. Hey, David from Mexico, good to see you. David. Some good gardening in Mexico, but you've got, I mean, depending on where you are, you've got such a massive amount of different ecosystems that you can work with. A lot of very good pumpkin varieties and corn varieties and bean varieties that are in Mexico that people in the United States don't know anything about. I had a really good discussion with a Mexican a couple of months ago when we were talking about pumpkin varieties, and my limited Spanish and his limited English, I was showing him some of the pumpkins that I had, and we were talking back and forth about varieties. And man, I would love to get some of those Mexican varieties to try here. I think they would do pretty well in Alabama. Yeah, watch out for the bird poop, but don't mind the biosolids spread all over commercial crop fields. Exactly. Jupiter Mojo says, one of my cassava trees got away from me, 15 feet tall, and now what to do with it? Chop and propagate? Yeah, absolutely. You know what? If you have sandy soil, just go around the base of it and feel around there. And if you're finding roots that are about this big around, you know, you should be, if you have sandy soil, you can just kind of pat around, just do a little doggy digging, and then find out if you've got those nice big hard long roots coming out the sides, because they come in like a spoke from the center. If they're big enough, it's time to pull it anyways. 15 feet tall is probably time. Usually it takes about a year to 14 to 16 months, depending on how well cared for it was, to really start to produce large roots. But at this time, yeah, and if you're in Jupiter, warm climate, you could cut the top of it off and stick the cuttings in the ground all over the place. Harvest those roots, process those roots as quickly as possible, and either cook them or get them in the freezer, because they do not keep well. Once you harvest them, they do not keep well. I mean, I'm talking 2 days, they're starting to turn gray and black inside. You don't want that. You don't want them to oxidize and start to get weird flavors. So harvest the roots. Just know that when you're going to do it, you're going to spend some time and do it. Scrub the dirt off the outside, slit them down the sides, and peel off that outer barky skin. And then I usually cut them into pieces and pull the strings out of the middle, and I'll quarter them down the centers and chop them into chunks like this long, and then quarter those pieces and take the strings out, put them in the freezer, and then we use them later, because they'll come back. You can fry them or you boil them. We usually boil them, and then my wife fries them in lard, and that's our favorite way to eat them. Super, super good. There's nothing like cassava fried in lard, but they do well from the freezer. Morning glories are just domesticated bindweed. Yeah, exactly. They're in the south where it's very green, not like the desert on the north. Yeah, that's right. It looks beautiful. The pictures I've seen, I would love to see it in person. Bird poo is probably loaded with vitamin B12. I bet it is. That's probably what they put in our multivitamins. That's what they taste like. What trees would you recommend for heavy red clay in middle Alabama? Trees are so expensive, so I don't want to lose them. There's a lot that grows fine in that heavy red clay. The part that kills them is if your drainage is bad. So if it's in an area where it just turns into a swamp for a period of the year and it's red clay, that's a problem. If it's not like that, if it's not going to turn into a swamp, we had luck growing apples, plums, pears. The sand pears do well. Often the blueberries even do well. Man, you could grow Japanese persimmons, chestnuts, pecans. They'll all do all right. But if you do have it where the drainage is not very good, I recommend just, if you can mound up a little bit and plant the tree into a mound. So there's a little bit of the root system that's not going to be swamped and inundated. That'll often keep them from dying. It doesn't have to be super high. I mean, 16 inches or so. If you can make a mound, it's maybe 4 feet across. about 16 inches higher than the rest of the ground, and plant your tree in it. That can do it, or plant more on a ridge or a little bit of a slope. Some of that red clay out there is not too bad. Another thing you do to loosen the clay is add gypsum, or add your pulverized limestone from the local feed store. They'll often rent you a lime buggy, and you can spread it. Lots of lime. The pH up there is often in the 5s. Derek says, may I please ask for prayers to see us through this coming hurricane? We might take a direct hit. Praying that won't happen. Yes. Heavenly Father, we ask for Derek and for those that are in the path of this storm, that you will have mercy on him and on his house, his nursery business, his family. I just pray that you'll protect him and keep him. And for those others that are there, I pray that they will be protected, and that you'll work through the situation, and that people will turn to you in it and trust in you. And we just commit this to you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. St. Vitus and St. Genevieve, pray for us. Palmetto Paratrooper says, I moved a year and a half ago, and if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't even have bothered with annuals until I got perennials established. Oh, I know the feeling. I did that. I was ready to just go full on perennials completely. And the annuals, I started to realize how much production I was getting out of annuals. Like, I'm getting more food out of my accidental stuff that grew from the compost pile, because it takes years for the perennials, right? You're like thinking, I'm thinking long term, man, long term. Yeah, no, it's they're different tools for different situations. Agape Field says, hey David, I'm in the big thicket of Texas, zone 8B/9A. I have 2.5 acres, so congratulations, that's good, with a 1/4 acre pond. I'm wondering if a grocery garden would be better than a food forest for us. Well, in that small space, you know, if you want a high production garden, your highest production stuff is close to the house. So if you wanted to put a little raised beds in there, you know, or whatever you want to do, that's fine. I tend to just go grocery row garden as close to the house as I can, with maybe the herb garden being the very, very closest thing. Or if you grow salads. We don't really grow salads. We tend to focus more on higher producing stuff than leaves. But if you grow a salad garden, you grow that closest. But you could grow that in the grocery row garden too. So grocery row garden right near the house. Further out towards the edges of your house, pop in trees, shrubs, etc. You could put them around the edges and all around there. The food forest is going to be less maintenance, less production, but over time it becomes productive for very little input. So you could easily do both. You could easily do both. You just get less organized for, you know, and lower maintenance the further you get from where you're going to live. If you're worried about the economy and all that kind of stuff, you know, your classic survival garden is a victory garden, row garden, you know, high input, high return. After that, grocery row garden really pretty much just keeps food on the table, and it gives us a wide range of stuff. It doesn't tend to give us massive amounts of one thing. It gives us a bunch of different things that we can forage for from day to day. So we might go out with a basket and get some cucumbers and get a few tomatoes and get a watermelon and get some figs, you know, and you're getting like little bits and pieces, and you come in and you just bring in this pile of all kinds of random produce, and it's doing that all the time, like everything from the elderberries to arrowroot, you know, we're pulling them out of there. So King Shai says, hey Dave, hey, do I grow malanga? Yes, I do grow malanga, but I'm not great at it. You should talk to somebody from Hawaii. Perimeter food forest, that's the way to do it. African potato mint recipes. I'm thinking of trying potato chips. Hey, why not? They're supposed to be pretty good fried. I didn't get good yields on them this year. They look to have died out on me, so I'm going to see if they come back next year. I'm hopeful. Palmetto Paratrooper says, I planted my peaches, pears, and pomegranate on the mounds above the swells I dug. Thank you, Steve. Drive safe, man. Sorry you can't watch them in the car. I know, it's like somebody will text me in the car. I'm like, I'm not going to look at it. It's bad. It's probably a mortal sin to text in the car. I'm not going to do that. Green Country Agroforestry says if you want to build soil quickly and want to put the work in, the grocery rows are great. Thank you, I appreciate it. Where do you get the potatoes with the bulbils? Okay, so the Chinese yam. Let me see. 1 second. We have the Chinese yam right now growing in the I think she should. Sorry, I lost my chat. There it is. That is my daughter's store, and she does have some yams with bulbils in it right now. They sometimes call it the light root. So you need to have a word with the patron saint of agricultural chemicals. I don't think there's a saint over the agricultural chemicals, but I'm sure there's a saint against them. Probably all of them. Saint Isidore is the patron saint of farmers. Yeah, Christina says foraging is definitely the word for harvesting in the grocery or garden at this time of year. Totally. Scott, oh, you're coming to Scrub Fest? Yeah, we have Scrub Fest 3 coming up. Oh, I didn't tell you guys. Okay, wait a second. I'm gonna send you this link. This is for, I just had something cool happen, okay? So I have always been a big fan of this one particular forager. This is Scrubfest. One particular forager I am a very big fan of. Always appreciated his work. And he wrote a book last year, which was at long last, and I got a copy of it. And you probably know who I'm talking about. But anyhow, he is apparently, I have heard, it is rumored that he is coming to Scrubfest, and he will be speaking and bringing his book and setting up a table so we can have Green Dean talking at Scrubfest. Scrubfest is set up as an educational event for food forests, and anybody that wants to join the Food Forest Challenge at Scrubfest 2, it's a really good time because it takes place at the Scrubland Farms Nursery, which has the most amazing collection of food forest plants. Kids can come in for free. I never wanted to discriminate against large families. I am a little bit partisan towards having a large family. But I know that sometimes a mom will be like, I would love to go to this thing, but I have 4 kids. There's no way I can't buy tickets for everybody. I mean, I knew that after we had a few kids, going out to eat became financially painful, and going to an event kind of becomes painful. So kids get in for free. So 18 and younger, you can come in for free. If you're a high schooler, fine, come on in. It's fine. Because that's the future, right? We want the kids growing food. We want the kids being self-sufficient. They're going to be having to rebuild the ruins that we leave them. So it's important. So anyhow, the kids get in for free, but the event taking place at the Scrubland Farms Nursery means that we've got access to all of these trees. So usually I try to get there kind of early and then and pull some stuff aside and say, hey, could you hold this one for me and hold this one for me? And so it takes place at this really cool nursery. But other than that, we've got Randall from Flomaton Famous is talking about putting in a backyard orchard. He's got, I think he's hundreds of varieties of this point of different trees, and he's been testing them right at the edge of the Florida Panhandle. So Zone 8B, which is a difficult climate for temperate trees, he's had a bunch of success, and he's got a bunch of knowledge. So he's sharing. And then I've got Tommy Van Horn, who is an author, and he also runs a honey company, and he sells wax candles. His home family business, wax and honey, and they're successful at it. I asked him to come and talk about beekeeping because this is something that a lot of people want to add to their food forest in their backyard. So he's coming to talk. And then we've got Mark Bailey and Amanda Merrick, both who work with the University of Florida, who are both very good with food forest, edible, landscaping, that kind of thing. They're going to be giving a presentation. My wife is going to be giving a presentation talking about her cookbook and how she cooks all the stuff that comes in from the Food Forest and the Grocery Row Gardens. So this will be the first time she's ever given a presentation at one of my events. So I'm really proud of her for actually putting this book together. Super cool. So she's going to be joining us. But now, Green Dean is going to join us to talk about wild food foraging in Florida. So this is super cool. And then at the end of the day, I'm also doing a presentation called "Put in Your Food Forest in a Weekend." How to plant your food forest in a weekend. And so we'll be talking about that. And we have a lot of time to answer questions and hang out. And there's always food vendors, and we've got a great big tent, and there's a play area for the kids and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool event. I'm calling it the premier food forest event for Florida. So if you can make it, that is Scrubfest 3, and it's been really, really fun. So it's cool. It's worth going to. It's worth networking and meeting people. I've never met so many cool people. I've met so many cool people. So yeah, that event is coming up. Also, my wife's book is now on Amazon, The Florida Food Forest Cookbook by Rachel the Good. So this is also another one of the reasons that I haven't been doing very many videos lately, is because I was helping her with the editing and the layout, and I wrote plant profiles in the book too. So there's some on how you can actually grow the plants and kind of an overview of how the plant grows in the state of Florida and how we grow it, and then she writes about how we cook it. So a lot of people said, well, it's great that you grow such and such weird international vegetable, but how do you eat it? So that's the book on how you eat it. Another thing we just got out was free-range survival chickens. So getting these 2 books out in the last couple of weeks has been consuming a lot of time, along with the Food Forest Challenge. Free-range survival chickens, fantastic book. This is by Florida Bullfrog. This is how to keep chickens like you've never seen before. This is how to free-range chickens and pick out varieties of chickens and raise them so they don't die from predators. He is raising his birds in a very high predator environment, and they are surviving. He says he loses a hen about every 6 months, but he has many more replacing themselves because they hatch out. He talks about how to get eggs from extreme free-range birds, how you don't need a coop you don't even need to close your coop doors. I mean, this is crazy stuff, but it's how people used to keep chickens before the advent of the bagged factory feed and the modern hatchery chicken culture. It's like chicken keeping for poor people. How poor people kept chickens and survived. That's just with ingenuity and natural selection. So anyhow, yeah. It is let's see here. North Florida Wormworks. Nice to see you. Have you ever tried winged sumac? It's popping up all over, and I agree. I only have them as cuttings this year, so I want to throw some in for space fill. Yeah, we planted it in our previous food forest in North Florida, one of our previous food forests in North Florida. And the thing that surprised me about winged sumac was how the insects loved it. When it bloomed in the spring, and I think the second year after we planted it, we dug up a little like a side shoot off of one, and we planted it out in the food forest. When it was in bloom, it was absolutely covered. Just covered with insects. It was like walking underneath a power line that was shorting out. It was like, I actually was walking through the food forest and I heard this over my head, and I was like, that thing had blooms all over it, and there were so many different bees and wasps on it. It was fantastic. So yeah, very cool. James says, thanks for answering my question. Your channel is well known in my household. When I tell my wife, hey, I saw a David the Good video, she's like, what crazy thing are we trying to grow now? I know my wife was always like, what is this? Why do we have this? So let me find I'll find the link for you just a second. Yeah, it's my wife. She is amazing. We just kept bringing more. I just kept testing different crops from around the world. It's like, can we eat this? Is this useful? Yeah, this looks useful. This ought to grow pretty well. But sometimes I'd come up with just baskets of stuff that we had never eaten before. This is the link to Rachel's cookbook. It's really sweet. She did such a nice job on it. And then we were able to get it. I'll tell you, the margins on the book are not particularly good because we printed the entire thing in premium color, and that costs more. So, but it just needs it. It just needs it. It's beautiful, right? So we had all these garden photos over the years. There's some of our perennial cucumbers. And then you saw this one that's King Kong and Florida cranberry, key limes. We have both key lime recipes in here. Mangoes, and that is longevity spinach. Oh, I love this picture. I took this picture down in the tropics. That is an anole enjoying a mango. I mean, I want to paint my house these colors. So I put a link to the book, the Florida Food Forest Cookbook. All royalties go to my wife. Moringa. It's been a lot of fun. There's some twice stabbed lady beetles eating some of our cactus. So there you go. So laying out all of the photos and doing that. I mean, I'm not a professional, but this is how to make cane syrup. We wrote it all out. How to make cane syrup if you have a cane syrup, if you have a sugarcane crusher, and if you don't have a sugarcane crusher. Both ways. Yeah, a lot of fun. Florida Food Forest Cookbook by Rachel the Good. I love my wife. She's so good. So, how many children do we have these days? Last count we had 11. So, William, you're eating moringa right off the tree. I find it hard to do that. Eating it fresh, and it's kind of spicy. I mean, if it was kind of hidden in a salad, I could eat a little of it. The biggest mistake I made with moringa once was a friend of mine wanted to show off how cool his juicer was, and he said, "Got anything cool we could juice?" I said, "Let's take a fistful of these moringa leaves and just put them through there." So we broke off the entire stalks of leaves and just fed them through, and made this deep green moringa shots. And I tossed that shot down. I just about died. It was so brutal and horseradishy, and my stomach was spinning. I'll probably live an extra 10 years because of drinking that. I mean, I probably should drink that every day, but man, that hurt. Oh, that hurt. Y says moringa seed a day. Yeah, I heard that from a Jamaican as well. Eat a moringa seed every day. So, I like to just put moringa in soup, or I like to saute it and put it in scrambled eggs. So, yeah, you guys, I'm going to call it. It's coming up on 6 o'clock now. I should probably sing something. Let's sing Lime Buggy. One of the lesser known REM songs. There's a truck in my field, there is a truck. On the back is a thing, yeah, a thing is on the back. What's that thing on the back of the truck that's in my field? It's a lime buggy, buggy lime. What's the thing on the back of the truck in my field? It's a lime buggy, buggy lime. A lime buggy on a truck with a lime buggy, a buggy filled with lime filled buggy thing. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the thing on the back of the truck in my field? It's a lime buggy, buggy lime. What's the thing on the back of the truck in my field? It's a lime buggy, buggy lime. truck with a lime buggy, a buggy filled with lime, and lime filled buggy thing. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, adding dolomitic lime, liming all the time. I've got my spine, I've got my orange crush. She's a sad tomato. She's 2 miles up that road. What's the frequency, Kenneth? Is it your benzene? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the thing on the back of the truck in my field? It's a lime buggy, buggy lime. What's the thing on the back of the truck in my field? It's a lime buggy, buggy lime. A lime buggy on a truck. Truck with a lime buggy, a buggy filled with lime, a lime filled buggy thing. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Lime buggy lime. Lime buggy lime. Lime buggy lime. You guys, wonderful to see you all again. Sorry I haven't been doing these live streams as much lately, but it's good to be here. It's been fun. It's been fun having the little community on school and doing the Food Forest Challenge and everything, but I do miss you guys too. So appreciate you all. Thanks for joining me for a bit. I will catch up with you soon. Hopefully I'll see some of you at Scrubfest 3, and if you want to join the Food Forest Challenge, I think there is a link below this video. So catch y'all soon, and until next time, may your thumbs always be green.